Good morning. So today's talk is going to be about the WordPress JSON REST API. How many of you guys have heard of it? Perfect. Oh, pal. Yep. So that's awesome. I'm really excited that everybody's heard about it. So a little bit about myself. My name's Ivan Lopez. I am one of the engineering managers at 10up. I work with a team of 8 to 10 talented engineers on what we call pods. That's how we organize our teams within 10up. I've been part of the open source community for 5-6 years, and I've come to the last 3 WordCamps here in Orlando. So the JSON REST API. Doesn't WordPress already have APIs? Actually, they have a whole page on all the APIs that they have. The closest API to the JSON REST API is the XML RPC. If any of you have worked with XML, you know that it's really a pain in the butt to parse. It's heavy. Matter of fact, 40% of the code base on the iPhone app is just for cleaning up the XML, consuming it. So JSON, the first part of the JSON REST API, stands for JavaScript Object Notation. Basically, it's supported by most current languages. It's human readable. It's standard. Parsing is really easy, and it's smaller than XML, as well as you can have other third-party libraries to compress it and uncompress it to pass larger amounts across the web. REST stands for Representational State Transfer. Basically, it's HTTP actions applied to resources. Anything that you're touching over a REST API is considered a resource, so like a post would be resource. Basically, it's a default CRUD, so you can post to create something, get to read something, put or patch to update some information, and delete to delete information. Basically how it works is if you want to get a list, you go down to, for example, wp-json/post gets you a list. You would do a get there. If you wanted to get a specific post, you would add the ID. If you wanted to create a new post, you would post to your /post. If you wanted to update one of your posts, you would put or post to the ID. And if you wanted to delete a resource, you would delete to that resource. API stands for Application Programming Interface. A lot of the companies that we probably work with on a daily basis, like Harvest, GitHub, Stripe, Basecamp, Twilio, all of their infrastructures and platforms come with some type of REST or API that allows you to connect like your Basecamp to your Harvest, so when you're doing time tracking, everything's synced up. One of the major benefits of having this inside of WordPress is it actually brings platform independency. So imagine a world where you can control your content in WordPress and push it to Python, to your Android app, to a JavaScript-based front end, or to a Java or Ruby, and you don't have to worry about like creating duplicate content or moving content around. All right, so what can this API do? Basically, you can update posts, taxonomies, media pages, users, work with comments. Anything you could do in the admin, or most of it at least, you can actually interact with it over the API. WP-JSON gives you a list of all the endpoints that you can hit and what they allow. Post lets you update, create, read, update, delete, post. Taxonomies, you can only currently read. If you wanted to do more with it, you can actually extend the API through filters and actions. Same thing with comments. You can only read. Media, you can do complete CRUD, page, and users as well. Users requires authentication so that people across the world can't just like use your API and delete all your users. Talking about authentication, it comes with 3 basic types of authentication. The first is cookie authentication. It actually comes built into core. It's used for doing client-side request. Basic authentication, which is what we recommend for development environments. It allows external clients to communicate to your API. It does require installing the basic auth plugin. So just so that you guys keep this in mind, once you have this plugin installed, the API is actually open to the world. So somebody could query it. That's why certain endpoints do require authentication. And then there is OAuth, and I'm sorry, that's the one that we recommend for working with in the real world environments. Basic auth is fine for development, but it is not the most secure. Like I said, for OAuth, there's a plugin. For HTTP basic authentication, there's a plugin. They're fairly simple. All right, so how does it work? So if you wanted to get a list of all of your posts, you would go to your URL, wp-station/post. You'd get some data like this. So you'd get your ID, your title, status, the type of post. Author actually has all of the author information. So it'll tell you their name, their email, any metadata related to them. You have your content. Terms actually breaks out into giving you the category or taxonomy, the term, the IDs, and things of that nature. All right, so one of the cool things is that if you know how to use WP query, you can actually query posts fairly simple. It takes most of the parameters, so search, order by, term. Pagination is just like you would do it on a normal page. You just do page equals 2, 3, 4, and you can actually paginate fairly simple. And then the type parameter allows you to select what type of post type you want to use. So if you wanted to do page or media or link, if they still have that, I think they took that out. So if you wanted to get a post, for example, post 1241, it would return just a single object. And it would have the exact same data that it does in the list view. But through here, with some other parameters, you can actually get some more meta information from it. If you wanted to get the comments for that, you would just do /comments. Like I said, currently you could just read comments, you can't update. But like I said, you can extend the API through filters and actions in order to make it do whatever you need to do. All right, so let's say you wanted to update. You basically just do a put and pass the object of whatever parameters you feel like you want to update. So title, content raw, post image, things of that nature. This does require, like I said, basic auth or some type of authentication. Currently we're using admin:password, which is basic auth. If you wanted to create a new post, you would do the exact same request, but just straight to /post. And you would pass in all the objects that you want to, the information in the object that you want to create. If you wanted to pull a list of all your taxonomies, just go back to /taxonomies. You're going to get a list of all the taxonomies, category, tags, things of that nature. You can actually continue down that line and put the type of taxonomy and then go down and do the term and like get as much information all the way down. Same thing with media. If you want to get a list of all your media, you can just do /media. It'll also take an ID after that, and you can actually load a specific piece of media. One of the cool things that I don't see a lot of people talk about is it actually comes with a JavaScript version of the API. How many of you guys have used Backbone or are familiar with Backbone? Perfect. All right. So in order to use this, you don't really need to know a lot of Backbone. You could use it with JavaScript or any other language you want or framework. So basically, if you want to get all your posts, you could do new wp.api.collection.post. In Backbone, we have something called fetch, which actually pulls down the information. And then you could just do a undone function and do whatever you want with it and parse the information. So if you want to do it with jQuery or any of those other frameworks, you could easily implement it that way. So I really wanted to, the API itself is fairly simple to use, but I wanted to show you how other organizations and platforms use it, like REST APIs outside of WordPress. So I'm sure everyone here has seen or used Trello. They actually use a very simple REST API. So basically, if I go to my board and I want to load the board, you would go to trello.com/1/boards, and it'll actually give you all the information on your board. You'd get an ID, a name, a description, the URL, and there's a little bit more information that comes with that. Now, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of this company, but have you guys ever heard of Stripe? Payment processing? All right. So Stripe is like the developer's dream for payment processing. They have a great APIs, great documentation, really bad dashboard. Like there's no analytical dashboard to tell you what's going on in your business. So this company called Baremetrics literally just goes and grabs information from that API. And they built a simple dashboard. I mean, any of us could probably have built this. Make $250,000 a year right now, just by leveraging somebody else's API. Now, this is extremely important because with Baremetrics and Stripe, they've come together to work, and they've brought each other more business. So this guy's business has just boomed in I think like a year because he copied information on a per post basis from one WordPress install to another WordPress install because they're sharing content. It's not fun. You either have to like try to parse RSS, or you have to try and create custom endpoints, which if you've made those, they're not extremely difficult, it's just a lot of code. With the WordPress REST API, you can simply leverage it instead of having to create these custom endpoints, and you can, from the dashboard, just make a request to that endpoint or that specific post and pull it in. You don't even have to pull it into WordPress, you can just pull it into the front end. So WordPress is an amazing CMS, but sometimes you might feel restricted by the loop. So this allows you to kind of break outside the loop. It lets you pull in content, it lets you do really easy infinite scrolls. It lets you build little modular aspects to your site. Has anybody ever built a location finder or used a plugin? Was it fun? I mean, it was fun, but it could have been built smoother. Yeah, so.
Torture sense.
Yeah, see?
Self-deprecating torture.
Definitely. And there are plugins out there that do it. But I mean, if you could literally just request everything through JavaScript and update the Google Maps and make it so seamless that as your user is typing things in or moving, it's updating that whole experience for them, they're gonna be a lot more engaged and you're gonna have them stay on your page a lot longer. Things like AppPresser actually leverage now the JSON REST API for pulling in the content into their mobile apps. You could do that as well. Let's say you had a store and you wanted to do like a favorite list or things like that. You could really quickly integrate this with that. If you want to create any CRUD operation on the client side, if you wanted to create a front-end facing interface for people to administer information. So let's say you had an invoicing application that you made on top of WordPress. Instead of having your users log into WP admin, you can create a very drag and drop friendly interface on the front end where they can hit a button, add a line item, it auto updates it, and then they can hit send and it actually saves it and sends an email. And that happened without ever refreshing the page. I don't know if you guys ever seen, there is actually a small little plugin that somebody made to create a WordPress admin kind of like remake, but using the JSON REST API. It currently uses Bootstrap. It's really cool because it's really snappy. So you can, I think right now you can only update pages in post. But imagine being able to pull in content and making really interactive custom dashboards for your users and your clients, where you can pull all types of information. You can tie this then into third-party services to create an extremely engaging experience for them on the dashboard. As well as, like I said, you can literally just leverage this piece to make whatever application you might want. I've thought of making, personally, for fun, a spec type of implementation, just because as a manager at 10up, I do a lot of spec work. So it definitely beats hitting new post every single time. So there's tons of resources for learning. There's been, I'd say, half a dozen talks on WordPress TV. There's actually the API itself on GitHub. There's the documentation, which they've done an amazing job at pretty much telling you what you can do with each element inside the API. There's the OAuth, the basic authentication plugins. There's actually an API console that you can install and actually test all these endpoints in the browser. There are the JS client, a PHP client, a WP CLI client, and a Node client, so that you guys can leverage this data in different frameworks. There are numerous tools for testing. So like Postman HTTP, I don't know if you guys ever used that or had to work with like any type of APIs. You definitely don't want to just like sit there in the console and start typing stuff away, because it's just not going to be as responsive. So there are things like this plugin that lets you put in the URL. It actually gives you all the feedback. It lets you parse things out. And there are several tutorials out there that can actually walk you through implementing and extending the API. The API is full of actions and filters to do whatever you want. One important thing, and this could affect if you ever do implement this on a legacy site. How many of you, when making metadata, use the underscore and then the slug, or the key? All right, so that in WordPress means that it is private. So that means that when you install this and you try to grab that post, all of that meta fields will not show up in the API because they're set to private. So the reason most people do the underscore was because originally in WordPress, when you used to do without underscore, it would show at the bottom under metadata. Now that's hidden by default. So you technically shouldn't be doing that. You still can grab that data. You just have to use a filter. I would recommend migrating it to use the no underscore, just because you'd be making 2 requests or an extra request every time you ping the API. One for the API data itself, and the second time to pull in this private metadata. Questions? Yes, sir. Oh, we'll get you a mic.
Is 10 up hiring?
Oh, they're always hiring. Like I said, we have somebody new like every Monday.
I think you answered one of the questions already about the metadata, getting all of that into, and you know, you have a custom post type metadata, bring that into the API, and like you said, it's more of a filter it out by making it private if you don't want it in the API. Okay, so my other question is, do you have any idea on the, you mentioned there was somebody who did the admin, the Bootstrap admin. Do you have any name to go by that? Because I tried to find it and I couldn't.
I can find it shortly.
Do you know who did it? Or is that good?
Lewis, he's one of the co-contributors.
It's probably, is it Rachel?
No, I think his name's Lewis. I can definitely, I'll get it for you.
Sure.
Yep. So, like I said, it's basically, he did the REST API and an implementation with Bootstrap. Any other questions?
So when we're creating custom post types in the plugin, what special considerations do we need to take to make it work with the API, both in terms of reading the data, but also especially writing data?
So, like I said, the biggest obstacle is going to be your metadata. You got to make sure that you're using no underscore. So if you're using like advanced custom fields plugin, none of that'll show. So you could either duplicate it or add extra filters to try to fix that. It's just going to be like anything else. You know how when you do insert post and you pass the post parameter, it's the same thing. It's just going to be in an object format.
I just want to know if these slides will be available.
I will make them available. I promise.
With WooCommerce and Gravity Forms releasing their own APIs, do you see any conflicts, or is there an integration that you would prefer to use?
I have seen a lot of them actually making custom integrations that align with the API. So I think BuddyPress has one. I think WooCommerce has one. Like I said, I think they're starting to align with this. This will be going into core. It won't be a plugin. I don't think it's on track for 4.1, but It was close, but it's still really stable. It's production ready. I mean, there's companies that are using it for all sorts of things. So yeah.
Ivan, just so the opportunity doesn't pass up, can we take a second to work the logistics of how these slides will be available?
I will put them on a slide share, and I will make sure that
They're also going to post on the Orlando website all the links.
Yep.
So you don't have to worry about following individual. You don't have to worry about following individual people. I mean, you can tweet it out, but at the end of the day or at the end of the weekend, they will be posting on the WordCamp Orlando website all of the links to all the slides.
Yep.
So 2014.orlando.wordcamp.org for all the slides. So they'll be up there. Give them a couple of days maybe.
Thank you for that.
You just have to send it to David.
yeah. Make sure he gets them.
You said we can extend the API. Are there current plugins that already extend it, or and then the second question, is there a way to query a random site to see if any extended capabilities exist, or do you just have to know in advance that those APIs have been extended?
All right, so most of the API right now is going to be extended through a plugin. So if you have admin access, you can go and see if there's like WP API, JSON, or type plugin. If you want to see how they're extending it, you could actually look at like OAuth, and under the WP API Git repo, there's a couple extensions that people have done. Taylor Lovett has actually created a whole theme based on the WordPress JSON API. He's one of the directors at TEDUp. Like I said, there are filters. They're fairly simple filters and actions to manipulate it, to add custom endpoints, to jump in at multiple areas into the API request. In the WP, if you go to WP-JSON/, that's actually like the index of all the requests. So technically, if everything was registered correctly, you could go there and see what request you're allowed to do. Okay?
Thanks.
No problem.
It's not saving anything?
You disconnected it?
No, it works. It's not using the JSON yet.
Which one are you using?
I thought it was, but maybe I'm wrong.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And would you say it's the same concept, meaning that you click on your favorite tab, then
you gotta log in.
You gotta be logged in, and then your
avatar.
Your avatar appears on your favorite tab, and this is all processed client side with Backbone and JavaScript.
Yep.
Obviously, it should be with the API, but he's the guy who did it, so.
He didn't want to like complicate his talk with like 10 different dependencies, probably.
That was it, because I created it so I could share the code, and I want it to be there.
There you go. Anything else? Alrighty.
I didn't know it was there.
There you go.
Do you have any questions for the audience? Do you have questions that would help in your development and processing?
I mean, ideally, when implementing things, I would take the ability to leverage this into consideration. I think that by utilizing it, you're going to be able to create much more engaging experiences for your end users. You're going to be able to leverage a lot more of the JavaScript frameworks like Backbone, Angular, Ember, and create those type of experiences, which before were much harder before the API. I mean, that's pretty much it.